What is the worst case of psycho overprotective parenting that you've ever seen? The people I babysit for. Oh god, I could tell 1000 stories. The kids just turned 9 and 10. I was reprimanded by the father for letting them sit in the YMCA lobby unattended while I went out to my car to get something. Also, they live in a cul-de-sac with a giant yard that's shared with all the neighbors. There are kids out there every day. They are not allowed to play with them. They have to stay inside and read. Emo kids should regularly get cuts and bruises from playing outside. These kids freak out if they get a scratch. We were at the park and the little girl picked a bug bite and it started bleeding. She freaked out. I need a band-aid. I told her I don't have any band-aids. She'll live. She cried. From a tiny dot of blood. The children are not allowed to say fart under any circumstances. They can't watch Nickelodeon. Only PBS Kids. I was spoken to for allowing one of them to take out a SpongeBob book from the library. Gimme a break. Sounds like the parents could write 101 ways to raise a serial killer. My best childhood friend mom was an overprotective bee. After his dad left him, she practically went insane. She went and enrolled him in counseling before putting him on a crap ton of psych meds, some of which being her own meds not prescribed by a doctor. One night he locked himself in his room to Skype his dad. He left his mom because she was overprotective, and his mom came upstairs and busted down his door with a chair or some crap and took his laptop away and told him he was never supposed to talk to his dad ever again. So he threatened to run away or kill himself. So she sent him to a mental rehabilitation camp for about a year. After he got home he was extremely depressed and told me when we were alone that he never wanted to stay with his mom ever again. Then about a month later he packed his stuff and had printed out legit adoption papers and was planning to run away to my house and let my parents adopt him. His mom caught him and drugged him with a heavy sedative for their dog who had just gotten surgery. She called an ambulance and had him moved to a mental asylum where he still is today and will be till 2017. I get to see him about once a year on his birthday when my mom drives me up to see him. It is really sad because he is a normal kid just with a super overprotective mother, and she has ruined his life. When he gets out I will be going into my freshman year of college and I'm planning to pick him up and never take him back to his mom. Take him in as a little brother. Kid I went to high school with was constantly grounded, and for really dumb things as far as I can tell. He hardly got to come out and do stuff around the neighborhood. It seemed pretty crazy at the time, but I guess not psycho based on what I know can happen. My boyfriend and I were on a cruise, which stopped at multiple islands. We were in St. Kitts hanging out on the beach where they had a little open bar to get food and drinks. When we first got on the beach, we went early so we can get chairs. After 20 minutes, an older couple with a few little kids, all girls, insisted we had taken their chairs that they had previously reserved, but they had no tags on the chairs so they walked a ways down the beach. Anyways, we're at this little tiki bar thing getting food and drinks when one of the little girls of the older couple wearing a huge bucket hat is wandering around the front of a gift shop where there were wooden stairs. All of a sudden, the little girl isn't paying attention and walks up the stairs and bumps her head on a tree and falls down 2 steps. We saw the whole time and she barely bumped her head, but as a child I probably would have cried too. The mother ran over to the little girl screaming, oh my god, are you alright? What happened to you? What happened? Oh my god. Totally made the situation worse and the little girl started screaming even more. When the dad turns to us and asks if we saw anything, we just said she bumped her head and fell. No big deal. The dad literally rolled his eyes and told his wife to calm the frick down. My father used to be a gymnastics coach and judge. One of the few people in my state that was a level 3 in both men's and women's gymnastics. What that means is that he could coach and judge regional, state and national comps but not international ones. At one of the regional comps my father was judging and he was approached by one of the parents of the gymnasts asking for her child to get at least a 9.3 to stay in her club's elite team. Her child was averaging a 9.0 across the comp. My father reported it to the head judge and it wasn't the first time she has been warned to not approach the judges during the comp. When the session ended, the head judge called in all the judges and told them that if the woman approached them again to send her directly to the head judge. An hour into the next session, she approached another judge on the same table as my father and the head judge. She was ejected from the comp and her child was disqualified. When parents agree to enter kids into comps, they have a page of rules they have to agree to. One of them is not to approach judges until after the awards are presented. If they do, their child may be disqualified. TLDR. Parent approached judge at comp asking for score to be changed for her kid several times. She gets ejected and her kid gets disqualified. Despite living the suburban white picket fence dream, my next door neighbors don't let their 9-year-old out of their sight. Ever. EVER. Play dates are completely supervised and rare. Roving groups of kids his age are everywhere. Parks a block away in any direction, and he'll be twirling a hula hoop around alone in his backyard. When he loses a toy over the fence, he can't come to our door to ask for it back without mommy, like we're going to John Wayne Gacy him or something. I hope when he eventually murders his folks, he spares us. Live in Midwest and have several. 1. 12-year-old girl lives next door to me. For our summer block party, the parents drive 4 houses up the street to attend. At sunset, the wife screamed bloody murder at their daughter to stop playing so they could go home and put on long sleeves pants and prevent mosquito bites. It was like 100 degrees out, so I'd choose bug bites over pants and long sleeves any day. Mosquitoes can also bite though clothes, so I'm not sure what they were solving. Drove her back to house 4 houses down, changed, then came back. Same wife made her husband leave about 1 hour after they returned because he had had 3 beers over 5 hours and she doesn't allow him to have more than 3. 2. A girlfriend's parents were very strict, not religious, just crazy. They would only let her ride her bike around in their yard, regardless of age, because there was a highway nearby. This was in rural Missouri, about 2 hours from a major city in a town of about 2,000 people. The highway was a 55-mile-per-hour rural highway that has hardly anybody driving on it. My aunt doesn't let my cousin run. My cousin, is asthmatic, so obviously there have to be some precautions. But no running whatsoever. My aunt even went as far as telling my cousin that she had a dead lung, a lie, and she could kill the other one if she ran and did exercises, an even lie. As you can guess, my cousin is growing up to be a chubby, scared girl. I'm a guy, for starters, so I sort of understand my dad being nervous about me seeing anything having to do with sex. He was a bit of a wild child. He did every drug imaginable in late high school and college, and his friends got into lots of trouble, so I know why he was so scared I would act out and be a crappy kid like him. But I was always such a relaxed and easy child to deal with. He had no reason to be so scared. Anyway, he was super overprotective of me seeing anything sexual. He wouldn't let me hang around with a girl at the house at all, even if he was around. He wouldn't let me see Starship Troopers when I was 15 years old because there were boobs in it, and wouldn't let me watch a show on TBS because there were 2 people making out in it, fully clothed. He was like that for years, constantly screening any movie or TV show I wanted to watch. I was secretly laughing at him at the time because I cashed in my V card with both genders the year I was 15. Oh, I got one right for this one. I've mentioned it before in some other threads, but I just can't get over how batshit insane this woman is. A good friend of mine has lived with his grandparents his whole life. It's just his grandma now, and she's insanity turned to 11. I've known this guy since high school. It took 4 years before I was allowed to go into his house because his grandma didn't like the fact I have long hair. She didn't want a hippie in the house. When he did leave the house, she would call around 8-9 PM and ask when he's going to be home. Well, I use ask loosely. It was more like pestering him that he needs to get home. She continues to call every 30 minutes or so. There's been no repercussions from him completely ignoring this though. When she goes out of the house, he has to go with her. I understand she may have a fear of going out alone, and that's probably bolstered a bit by her watching of Fox News, but they live in a very, very low crime area. There's been 1 shooting in the last decade, no muggings, armed robberies of people, and the only thing the cops really have to respond to are people stealing from Walmart. His car got totaled 2 years ago. He still doesn't have another one because she won't let him save the money to get another one. He always has to pay vast majority of bills and rent, despite her being fully able to pay her share as well. He can't just refuse because she'll eventually kick him out, and that threat holds more weight now since he doesn't have a car. He's using hers to go back and forth to work. Several years back we went on vacation and she told us not to go to a place that was on our agenda because it was a bad area. We told her we wouldn't. Of course, we did anyway, and surprise, not a single problem at all. Can't have any alcohol. He sneaks it in anyway. Has to leave the door to his room open. And no bad language. In all honesty, she treats him like a 12-year-old. He's in his upper 20s. He needs to grow a set and move the frick out. One of my friends absolutely has to call his parents every single day. If he can't make it one day, his parents will send him onto a guilt trip. To date, he always has to ask parents before deciding on smallest of things. He is in his 30s now. My sister was by far the worst I've ever met. She was a typical crappy teenager in high school, doing the whole "I'm 17, I'm grown, you can't tell me what to do" thing, including drinking, drugs, and sex, none of which I have any problem with, but probably aren't a good idea if you don't possess the responsibility to deal with them. She got knocked up at 17 by a dude who bailed on her, and she took about 1.5 tons of reality to the face and decided to turn her life around. Problem is, she swung too far back in the other direction and became a super fundamentalist Christian and chalked her getting knocked up by a transient Mexican farm worker, and literally everything else, to God's plan. After my nephew was born, things didn't start to get bad until he was around 7 or 8 and developed his own personality. She started forcing him to go to church and catechism against his wishes. She also severely restricted the information and media he was allowed access to. Books were restricted solely to the Bible and other religious texts, and educational books so long as they didn't contradict scripture in any way. She refused to allow him to have friends unless she'd vetted them and ensured they came from a good Christian family. Until he was 16, the only television he was allowed to watch was Disney Channel and CNN. She put parental block on everything else. He wasn't allowed to see movies rated above PG or get his driver's license until he was 18, and she couldn't really stop him anymore. Video games were right out of the question. The end result of his sheltered upbringing was that, as soon as he was a legal adult, he began to rebel against everything she'd ever imposed on him in whatever way he could find. He started drinking and doing drugs, stopped going to church or any of the religious studies groups she made him go to, and fell in with a group of guys who got him in a fair amount of trouble. Thankfully he's calmed down recently, in his early 20s. He's in college now, still drinks and smokes weed, but not nearly as much as he used to, and, to my knowledge, hasn't committed a crime in a few years. My parents had software on the computer that collected everything me and my brother would ever type into it and send it in a daily email. When I found out in high school, I felt violated and upset, and that is exactly when I stopped talking to my parents about relationships. I had a boyfriend at the time and my mother read all of our AIM messages. Great. I lost a lot of trust in them for keeping that from me. It still disgusts me. My parents were always very overprotective, but this one just felt so invasive. My grandmother was very strict with my mother and aunts. She controlled what they ate and wore and who they spoke to. They weren't allowed sleepovers or sweets, or to have an opinion about anything. They were constantly punished for normal little kid behavior, having nightmares, wanting to dance, having friends, until it twisted them all up. They were looking forward to college, as they were excellent students, so they could finally get away and live normal lives. My mother was told she was too immature for college and had to stay home and go to community college, even though she got a full scholarship to a 4-year school not far away. So she ran away, 3,000 miles away, and went nuts. She never went back home no matter how difficult things got because she didn't want grandma to break our spirits. 2. My cousin hand-feed her son until he was 4. He was placed in a high chair and she feed him with a spoon. I was shocked and asked why. She told me that he made a mess on the floor when he fed himself. WTF. Of course he did. My kids started feeding themselves the day they ate solid food. Fine motor control is not an accident and must be practiced. I also had crayons and paper on my coffee table for 10 years. Sheesh. Side note, her son is super creepy. Long story, but I would not leave a female alone around him. Nothing concrete but big on the creepy vibes. We have time. My girlfriend just went to college in a nearby city. Her parents constantly make her take pictures of where she is to prove that she's being good. If she studies with a guy, they call her a yes. Last night she didn't respond to the text telling her to send a picture because she was asleep. So her parents activated the GPS tracker on her phone to find out where she was. She was sleeping in another dorm because it was closer to where she was at the time. They threatened to pull her out of school and make her go to community college so that they can keep a closer eye on her. Every time she sends them a picture of where she is, if it's not in her dorm or a classroom, they call her the S of college. She thought going to college was going to be the end of their crap. Sorry, half venting, half response. I would tell them to frick off, go get a student loan, part-time job and be done. I'm paying student loans. Lot better than that mental abuse. There was a girl in my town who ended up getting a restraining order against her mother. The mother would make some sort of excuse to get into the daughter's high school, lie about her daughter having a learning disability, then sit next to her in class and make sure she wasn't talking to anyone during class or at lunch. The woman would even do things like emptying the girl's book bag and search through her things in the middle of the school. As far as I know, the girl ended up living a fairly normal life afterwards, but her mother definitely made her have some major social anxiety issues. Stop. Do not fall into the Reddit coma. I have been trapped in this thread for 3 hours and only have the willpower to leave now because I have to use the bathroom. Don't read further or you will be sucked into the lives of others that are truly fricked up. My ex and I were in college and we both still lived with our parents. We went to school locally and she was 19. I was 21 at the time and they were so overprotective and they mistrusted her so much by default that when she started middle school, every night they would shove chairs into 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 chairs. They started doing this without her showing any inclination to sneaking out or sneaking people in as a child, and they continued to do it well into her college years and NBSP. Needless to say, crap got weird and incredibly frustrating. Back in high school, my friend and I would regularly hang out at his place to play video games and what have you. He had a younger brother who was in middle school at the time and also had a friend come over regularly. This friend of his was the product of a super religious, super strict, single mom. When he would come over, we had to hide away anything he thought his mom wouldn't want him to see or hear. It was a huge list of things, but one of the strangest things was anime. My friend's brother was an anime fan and had mangas and posters, so when he would come over he had to take them down. A pretty funny moment with him was when my friend and I were playing the first Ninja Gaiden for the OG Xbox. He came in with his hands over his eyes and asked us to pause the game so he could get something. We obliged and waited for him to find what he was looking for and leave, but just before he left the room, I unpaused a little too early and he witnessed Ryu cut a guy in half and a fountain of blood shoot out of him. He screamed and ran out of the room. I actually still kinda keep in contact with him. He is a lot better these days. I remember talking to him about how he was like when he was still in middle school. He told me that he was so scared of his mom. He literally thought his mom could read his thoughts. That's why he was too scared to do anything behind her back. A guy right next door has an overprotective mother. During weekdays he'll be locked inside with his housemaid while both parents work. He's an only child, so he only socialized with other people at school. During weekends, his parents sent him to tons and tons of academic and non-academic courses. When we played on the street, we sometimes hear him screaming in his house when he's alone. His parents only allowed him to play with an equally academically accomplished kid next door. These two had very limited contact with other kids. A student I tutored over the summer. I honestly felt terrible about it, but I took the job so I could be sure to take it easy on him. Freaking 15-year-old boy whose mother had him meeting with 4 tutors 3 times a week to pre-teach him his sophomore year curriculum so he could, and I quote, boost our GPA so we can get into Stanford. B. What's this week crap? You're learning to speak French? My aunt uncle are Chabad Jews, very religious sect. They are so afraid of their children learning about the world and assimilating that they won't let them wear shirts with animals on them that are not kosher. Example, a lion. When I was a senior in high school, I passed out candy on Halloween when my mom's friend brought her kids over. She had a glass of wine with my mom while her 2 kids waited impatiently to go back out trick-or-treating. After about 45 minutes and the kids constantly begging to ransack the rest of our very nice rich neighborhood, their mom agreed to let them go out by themselves while she finished her wine as long as they took a cell phone, stayed on our side of the street, and could be back in 20 minutes. This wouldn't have been weird if her kids weren't 15 and 17-year-old teenagers and not mentally or physically impaired in any way. TL. DR. Kids not allowed to cross the street or trick or treat by themselves. A friend of mine freshman year of college was pre-med. Toward the end of the year, he got a job for sophomore year as an RA, which gave free room and board, pay, and a limited but complimentary meal plan. The last day of finals, his parents found out he made a B in organic chem, the only B he got all year. His mom promptly called the housing and residence office and told them that his grades were suffering too much to become an RA and that she were turning down the job for him because he clearly couldn't prioritize correctly. Another friend told me that whoever answered the phone told it was none of her business and she was causing more harm than good for her son. As far as I know, he was an RA for the rest of undergrad. A girl I dated in high school wasn't allowed to drive a car that was of natural color, meaning no black, white, blue, green, or tan. Had to be a color that stood out against the road and surroundings. Her mom was afraid the car would blend in with the road and she'd be killed. This is completely honest. When Chernobyl reactor tragedy happened in Russia, my mom came out screaming, "The radiation is coming, get inside." Happened to have all my friends over at the time. I was like 12. I live in South Carolina. This is somewhat common but all the same I think is psycho overprotective parenting. Purity rings and those dances that fathers and daughters go together called purity balls. I'm not making this up. My daughter is in middle school. She made friends with a girl whose mother has to join in on every activity. When the girls went to her classmate's 13th birthday party together, the mom attended it as well. Fine, right? It was a sleepover. A group of girls at the birthday girl's house, and the mom. In case I haven't explained correctly, yes, this mom attended sleepovers with her daughter at other kids' houses. Well, my daughter and this girl got close last year. I have done everything in my power to avoid meeting this mom. The most recent time, the girls wanted to go to the mall together, which meant I would have to follow the girls with the mom like 4 feet behind the girls at all times. I really am not down for that. It creeps me out tremendously. I already said something about the family in a previous thread, but I still have a good answer, and sweet comma, am I right? Anyway, there was this family of 2 parents and 4 kids that had the most overprotective health nut mom ever, and she also was a very strict conservative Christian. Their dad wasn't the same way, but he pretty much allowed her to be strict like she was. She wouldn't let her kids do things that most normal kids were allowed to do, like eat any food that wasn't organic and wholesome. She believed that GMO and HCF caused bad problems later in life. She also hated microwaves and wouldn't let her kids use them. Watch anything with any hint of the supernatural that didn't have to do with God. So that meant no Disney princesses, no Star Wars, no Harry Potter, no Lord of the Rings, no celebrating Christmas or Halloween. Those are pagan holidays. No violence or swearing or sex in anything. My friend from that family had a Gamma Cube with a few games on it. He used to have Super Smash Bros. Melee, but his mom took Smash Bros. Because it was too violent for him. I feel sorry for her kids. I know the oldest boy is going to be far from the perfect kid his mom wants him to be, and the girls will probably follow suit. I know when I have kids, I will not be the same way. That's just asking for the kid to do a complete 180 when he grows up. A lot of sheltered kids dive right into what they weren't allowed to do, and end up going overboard with alcohol, drugs, partying, etc. GF of a high school friend of mine had crazy religious parents. They raised their daughter with traditional family values. No sex before marriage, no drinking. Abortion is a crime. Contraception is the same thing as abortion. Only trouble is, she grew up anti-contraception. She ended up having sex with her boyfriend, convinced that Faith would stop her getting pregnant. She got pregnant. Jesus jerking co-workers found a 2 inches x 2 inches folded scrap of printed soft copy in their 13-year-old son's Velcro wallet, removed every door in the house from its hinges, and stored them all in the garage, so he wouldn't have any privacy to sin. Kid committed suicide at 20. Parents showing up to job interviews with their son/daughter. I don't mean they dropped them off for the interview, or something. They insisted on sitting in on the interview, and even called us back to follow up on their kid's interview. This is how you doom your kid's employment prospects. But then again, maybe this is what they're trying to do. Can't let those kids become too independent, now can we? One of my friends is 22 years old. He bought new shoes and was going to come hang out with me, but his mom wouldn't let him go out because she didn't want him to ruin his new shoes. My best friend is Korean and his parents were super strict and traditional. He had to work in finance, law, healthcare, and had to marry a Korean girl that fit prototypical mold of a Korean housewife. Naturally, he resisted and ended up meeting a girl, OkCupid, an adorable white girl from Minnesota that worked as a flight attendant. Rewinding a little, his parents helped him put a down payment on a condo with the condition that they get to have a set of keys to show up and help him do housework and whatnot. Back to the present. He continued seeing this girl, who flew to NY as often as she could. A couple of times he had her over. His parents showed up unannounced. They would call when they were blocks away, and she hid in the closet for hours on end. One night, his mom showed up completely unannounced. No phone call, and she saw the white girl in the apartment. My friend just told the truth and his mom, a religious Christian, started bursting in tears and fell onto her knees and started to pray in semi-tongue, saying things like remove the devil from my son and blah blah. Before she left, she ordered him to break up with her. I met up with both of them and they were visibly angry and distraught and lots of drinks were had. A few hours later they were just gonna head home, but while he was out with me his sister had been calling him with warnings that his mom and now his dad were waiting for him at the apartment. Of course, he didn't get any of the messages because his phone had died. They arrive at the apartment in total shock and almost instantly the dad orders my friend's sister to take her away and send her to a hotel. My friend and the girl were both drunk, but sobering up, and she started bursting into tears saying I love you, holding her arms out toward him while being dragged out by the sister. The next morning I saw my phone had about 10 voicemails, all from the girl. She was hysterical, saying things like what do I do? 10 seconds of silence, I love him, and then things like AHHH and so on. I knew someone in high school whose mom preferred him to masturbate to her naked body instead of pee. She feared pee would warp his sense of reality or something. I used to be a grocery store checker when a mother and her 5-6-year-old daughter came through the line. The daughter was standing upright in the grocery cart. I asked the daughter to please sit in the cart. Technically still not allowed, but whatever, and the mom got mad at me for addressing her daughter directly. Standing on an unstable moving platform at age 5? Totes legit. Being spoken to by retail employees? Forgotten. I fix a lot of computers, laptops, many for students. There's some really psycho spy software out there, which parents use to control basically everything on their child's computer. Stuff like microphone, webcam, key logs, browsing history, GPS location. When I found a software like this on my cousin's laptop, it was time for the old switcheroo. I removed the software and gave him a USB stick with instructions on how to set it up on his parents' PC, which he did. So now he can watch over his parents to make sure they don't get on any inappropriate websites or start talking to strangers. He's really caring about how he raises his parents. Also, I will be his coolest cousin for a lifetime. My friend is a professor and just had a grad student's mom call him about how if her son couldn't get into his course this semester it would ruin his future because, insert Luong email here. Again, this is a graduate student, not even bachelor's. How? Why? How? Who? Ugh. No one will read this, but growing up in my incredibly boring suburban Atlanta neighborhood, there was a family 2 houses down that had like 6 kids, all around my age. They were rarely outside, and when they were, the mother or father had to be watching them. and they were not allowed to leave the yard or even play with other children. If anyone, and I mean anyone, was walking on the sidewalk outside when they were playing, all of them were forced inside until the person passed by. As far as I know, the only time they left the house was to go to church, since they were all homeschooled. To this day, I don't support homeschooling. No offense to anyone out there, largely due to how socially inept one of the kids was, a girl, who turned out to be crazy cute, that I attempted to make conversation with many times. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.